Welcome in to the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you here with us, joining us for episode 70, the big 70 of the Hoth Hangout podcast. And we are here to talk about all things Bad Batch season 3, episodes 1, 2, and 3, which all came out on the same night. Pretty incredible to have over an hour of new Star Wars content in the form of Bad Batch to talk about today. So we are super pumped to discuss it here on this episode. Before we get into that, I want to give you a quick reminder that if you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, definitely check us out over there for the video version of every podcast, as well as reactions to newest Star Wars episodes and shows. Thank you to the 382 of you who are subscribed over there on YouTube. Additionally, you can contact us with Star Wars questions via email. Hangout@gmail.com is where we are reachable. Feel free to reach out to us with any thoughts or questions, Star Wars related or otherwise. We'd love to showcase them here on the podcast. Additionally, the Hoth Hangout podcast is listenable wherever you get your pods, including Spotify and Apple. And if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a 5-star review, we would love it and we would appreciate it if you left a 5-star review on the podcast, as it does also allow the pod to be more easily discovered by other people as well. Additionally, the Hoth Hangout channel is reachable on all the socials, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, or X. We are findable at Hoth Hangout on each of those. And additionally, we have a small announcement that we're hoping to have a Discord server for the Hoth Hangout community up and running sometime in the next week or two. So I imagine we'll probably have more of somewhat of a update or official announcement on that in episode 71 of the podcast. But be on the lookout for the link to the official Hoth Hangout Discord sometime in the next 7 to 14 days, probably. So be on the lookout for that. Our big question of the day today, moving into our discussion of the premiere of Bad Batch Season 3, is simply: did you enjoy Season 3 of the Season 3 premiere of the Bad Batch? Did you enjoy the Bad Batch premiere? And I will pose that to you as well, Joey. First of all, how are you doing? What are your thoughts about Bad Batch now that the 3rd season is officially here?
I, first of all, I was a little shocked at the times. They were a little
Yes.
bit longer than I thought. I thought they were all gonna just be chilling at 22 minutes each episode. I think we got one over 30 and a couple just under 30 minutes. So, was pleasantly surprised by that information. And but it just gave us a little bit more Bad Batch, a little bit of a Omega, as they like to call her.
Omega.
And yeah, it was definitely a fun 3 episodes. Can't wait to talk about them with you tonight. And yeah, it was I I I was so happy we got Star Wars again.
So I've been watching both season 1 and season 2. We're almost done with season 2. My girlfriend and I, and she wanted me to pass along that I know Gibbo's not with us tonight, but next time he's on the podcast, she wants Gibbo to do his best Australian interpretation of either Omega or someone on Bad
Yes,
Batch who has an Australian accent. There's
I
a
love it.
surprising amount of Australian accents in this show.
Yes, especially Omega.
And I think Emery does too, doesn't she?
Yes.
Considering, I
She's the
guess,
one. She's the one that keeps saying Omega.
Omega. Yeah. She was showcased a lot in these episodes, and yeah, like you said, I'm excited to talk about them. There's a ton to break down here. A lot of kind of reference to even some legend stuff as well, which we'll touch on maybe a little bit. But before we get into our discussion of the Bad Batch season 3 premiere, did want to talk about a couple quick notes in the Star Wars news world. Angela Bassett reportedly met with Lucasfilm about a possible Star Wars role in an upcoming production, and I was unclear if this was a film or a movie. I think my assumption was that it was a film it was
Mm-hmm.
talking about. Um, but for those who don't know, Angela Bassett is a very well-known actress, Emmy nominated, I think 3 times in her career. I know her most, maybe this is like very, I feel like this is a very Zoomer comment of me. I know her most from American Horror Story,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't watch anymore, but when it first came out, I think I was either in late high school, probably in late high school or early college. And she was in, I think she came on in like season 3 of that show, which I think was the Coven season. Anyways, So she was really good. She was actually one of the better parts about American Horror Story, and as the show went downward after, like, seasons 5, 6, and 7, it was like, "Man, if only they could bring back some of the characters and actors that were in the early seasons." And she was one in particular that
Mm.
I thought stood out as a great actress in this show. All that to say, um, someone who is very well renowned and has a lot of name brand value. So, potentially coming to Star Wars in a movie slash TV show near you in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah,
Do
if
you have any
she
favorite movies she's in?
yeah, well,
Or yeah.
definitely Waiting to Exhale. This shows the age gap here between you and me right here. Waiting to Exhale, I'll still get a groove back. So those are the when I hear Angela Bassett, that's what I go to. Just strong actor, actress in those movies, and just a great, seems like a great person overall. And she was also in the Black Panther movies as
Mhm.
well. As a more recent movie that she's
Right.
been in. So yeah, just a great character. And if she does end up, I know this is just reportedly, who knows where this goes, but if she ends up being, and for those who have read A New Dawn, if she
Mm,
becomes Ray Sloan, the one of the Empire's admirals, I think she ends up actually being general or something even higher. But she definitely would fit this role. It would be very cool if you ever see any of the art for Ray Sloan. You can kind of picture a Angela Bassett in that role too. So if that's where we're going, that's where a lot of Twitter slash X theories went right away, was to a Ray Sloan cameo. Yeah, I'd be all for that.
I still need to pick up a I think I now that I say that,
Yeah,
maybe I have a copy of New Dawn. I feel like
yeah.
because the
I,
cover is with Kanan and Hera, right?
Correct, yeah. Do you have a
I
copy of it,
think
or do you have it on Audible, or?
I know I have it on Audible.
Mhm.
I feel like I have a physical copy too. But anyways, I need to read that, honestly.
Yes, you do.
I guess some backstory on the character that Angela Bassett could be portraying in the near future. So I think probably the most people, yeah, most people would know her probably from her Black Panther role. Now in the
Mhm.
if we're talking about like modern day roles, but I need to educate myself on some of her more classic roles that you mentioned.
That was very nice of you. Classic roles. I know what you mean by that. The
What?
old one. I mean, those movies are, to be fair, like 20 years old, 25 years
Yeah,
old. So
yeah.
has she been
I
around? She's been around a long time. She's a great
yeah,
actress.
but she's still killing it. That's for sure. But yeah, hoping to see her in a Star Wars project very soon. Another cool piece of information that I believe just came out at the time of this recording, the morning of February 21st, I think is when this news broke. I think it was actually at a Nintendo Direct, potentially, where this
Oh,
was first showcased. Um, for those that were playing video games in the early 2000s, there was a great set of classic video games called Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2. There are also more modern renditions of Battlefront and Battlefront 2 that came out within the last decade, certainly. I think Battlefront 2 is what, like 4 or 5 years old now, maybe? Um, roughly or something like that.
yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah,
But
maybe
these are like
maybe older, maybe a little older. Yeah,
a
but
little
yeah.
bit older. But these are like the precursors to those games. So
Hmm.
they're entirely different. They're actually third person. I guess you can play them in first person if you want to, but the classic way that everyone was introduced to these games was in third person, and there were all kinds of game modes. There was this game mode called Assault, where it was like all the good guys versus all the bad guys. So there was like 4 Anakins and 3 Obi-Wans like
Really?
running around facing like 2 General
Okay.
Grievuses and 5 Darth Mauls and 2 Count Dooku's. It was just like chaos. It was awesome.
Now, will this be a
Uh
multiplayer type of
yeah,
game?
multiplayer. So when this originally came out, I I wanna say, and this may have just been because I didn't have Xbox Live as a kid until I was probably, like, 13. So when I played this game, I was probably, like, 8 to 10 to 12 maybe, um, but I did not have Xbox Live, so me and my neighbors always just played split screen,
Yes.
like
That
the
I mean
4
that.
little corners of
Okay.
the TV where you're all
Okay.
sitting, like, up real
So
close.
where I was saying the divide between you and I as far as the age, That's right in my wheelhouse. The split screen
Yeah.
playing. Well, that what's when we were playing Halo. That's the same thing. We would have the 2x2 split screen, and you're just kind of peek, trying to squint your eyes to see where you're at and not look at your friend's screen. You're like, "Hey, stop looking at my screen. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely there with you. There with you on that one.
Yeah. And this actually comes out in less than a month. It comes out on March 14th
Mm.
for all platforms, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, and PC. And it's available both games as part of the Classic Collection for $35. So
Wow, that's a good
I
deal.
I will definitely be playing this.
Do we? Is it a hot hangout gaming session
It
we
might
need to
be.
do?
It
Yeah.
might be. Check out the YouTube channel. We might do a live stream next month sometime with this game. This is fun fact. This is also so during like the I don't know, late 90s to probably 2010 era was when there was a website. I don't know if you ever visited this website. There was actually two of them. There was cheatcodes.com and there was
Mm-hmm.
gamewinners.com.
I don't know if I did the
Uh,
second one.
and you would always go to one of these two or both websites when you wanted to figure out how to, you're just frustrated. You're like, I just need to beat it. And so you go to the website, it tells you what to do. Or sometimes it
Oh,
was like
okay.
actually a cheat code when they were like Easter eggs in games. To this day, the only cheat code I have memorized from any game I've ever played is from Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Oh, perfect. Oh,
I could
imagine if they still have it in the game.
I could rattle off the D-pad cheat code for unlimited health to you right now. Is that if that's not a little bit sad, then I don't know what is.
Go. Let's hear it.
It's up, 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 left, down, 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 left, up, left, right.
All right. There we go. Ben's cheat codes on a hot
Yep.
hangout.
In case anyone was wondering, I will be so floored if they actually kept that in the game. That'd be pretty funny. But
Nice.
um, yeah. Anyways, both these games coming to all platforms on March 14th for $35. Be on the lookout for that. I'm super excited. I
Yeah.
can't wait. Um, and then we wanted to move on to some a viewer comment from last week's episode. And then we do have one last surprise here in a few minutes before we get into our Bad Batch discussion. The viewer comment from Aunt Vesuvi says, "Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Joey. Thanks, Gibbo. I'm not sure why, but like Ben, I also have a feeling the entire gang will survive, even Tech. It's a thought that keeps popping into my head. I cannot claim any clairvoyance, but I hope I'm correct this time." I'm hoping you're correct too, Aunt Vesuvi. I just have this weird feeling that Tech is not gone, you know? I think he's gonna pop up in maybe like the second or third to last episode and gonna be like, Tech, how did you
and
make it?
and he's gonna have no glasses on. That's gonna be the
Mm.
that's gonna be the thing. He's gonna walk in like it's gonna be the silhouette from the smoke, and then he's gonna walk through. And he's gonna have no glasses on. They're not gonna recognize him, and then they're gonna see him, and yeah,
Who's that guy with no glasses? Oh
yeah,
wait, it's Tech.
yeah,
I will say I am also a proponent of hopefully they all make it.
yeah,
But I and maybe this is something we can talk about with our discussion today. I'm thinking, I don't know about Crosshair, man. I think if there's someone
yeah.
who's
I'm
gonna
thinking the
go,
same. Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, we'll have to see. Not too much of a spoiler, but I guess it's a little bit expected that all of them, with the exception of Tech, if you believe he's actually dead, are still alive at the end of episode 3 of season 3. So that's worth something, I guess. But we asked this question as part of last week's episode. And typically we ask this on both the YouTube community tab as well as over on Twitter. And I think this is the first time since we started doing this maybe 8 or 10 episodes ago that the responses between the two platforms are polar opposites.
Yep.
Um,
This was interesting.
over Yeah, I don't know what this I think this is a social experiment in group mentality. I think people see the
Yeah.
thing that's winning. Or no, I guess because
No,
they don't get a
YouTube you
chance to
can't
see.
see. Yeah, YouTube you can't see
Yeah.
for sure. And
Maybe
yeah,
it's just the
yeah,
selection of people on each of these platforms has very differing views in their Star Wars. But over on Twitter, on both platforms, we asked, "Will our remaining members of the crew survive through the last season of the Bad Batch?" The folks on Twitter, 70% said no, they will not survive. The folks on the YouTube channel, 72% said they will survive.
mm-hmm.
So
That's
all I'm
interesting.
saying is that's 2 more percent on YouTube, Joey. Does that mean we're in favor of them? surviving? I don't know.
I mean, I mean, I said last week I don't think they're all surviving, so my vote for sure. But yeah, it's interesting that if it really is just the collection of the people who continue to vote on each of these polls, that's just kind of where their brains go, and it's kind of interesting based on the platform. That's kind of what we're seeing, and especially with this one, where it is the exact opposite as far as who we if they think they're going to survive or not. So yeah, this was one of the more interesting questions. I thought for sure everyone would be either yes or no. I wasn't sure about everyone else. If you haven't noticed, I like taking the road less traveled whenever we answer these polls. It makes for a more interesting conversation. We can't always agree, but yeah. So I was shocked. I guess the people on Twitter or X are my people, and the ones on YouTube are yours.
I want to see a analysis of this social experiment. Do people on certain platforms tend to be more optimistic versus pessimistic, or
Right.
how does that work?
Well, if it's Twitter, yeah, definitely pessimistic.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, yeah, we'll find out, I'm sure, in hopefully less than 3 months' time. Now we'll know the answer to this question, and will it be yes or no? Who knows? Having said that, we will also be posting another poll on the YouTube community tab and over on X in the coming few days. So be on the lookout for both of those if you're interested in answering and seeing that your vote reflected in next week's episode of the podcast. And again, the special surprise we had before our discussion of the Bad Batch, we do have one last little thing. Joey has something pretty special he wanted to
Yeah,
share.
a little fun collection update for the episode today. Whenever I go to Target or anything, I always have to just look around and see what kind of Star Wars toys and figures and ships and Legos and everything is. I was very surprised to come across this one. Ben, I think you're gonna like this one. So I was walking through the toy section, and the end caps, right? Like at the very end, they'll
Yeah.
always have specific types of things like a Star Wars section or a Barbie section or whatever the new movie show is out. So of course I was walking by the Star Wars section, and this popped out at me. I'm like, I don't normally collect these, but when I saw this, I'm like, I'm gonna have to get this for sure. So here's a peek of what it is. It is a Hot Wheels of Ahsoka.
What? What in the crossover do we
Yeah,
have
right.
here?
Yeah. So you can see here, for those who are watching on the video version of the podcast, we have a tiny little Hot Wheels. I guess Ahsoka in a little maroon turbo looking. I don't know if that's supposed to be like her ship. I guess that's supposed to look like her ship now that I look at it. Um, with the red, like the deep red maroon looking color. And yeah, she's just chilling in it right here. Pretty fun. I thought this was cool. They also have a Luke Skywalker and a Princess Leia
Wow.
version of these as well. I did just pick up the Ahsoka because I was like, yeah, this is a must have. So, and I think the art on the card's pretty cool. It actually matches very well with the figure inside the car. So yeah, little Ahsoka Mattel Hot Wheels car, the crossover that nobody asked for, but I definitely paid $6 for.
Yeah, that is one of those things you see it in a store, you're like, "I didn't know that existed, but yeah, I'm gonna buy that."
Yeah,
I would have done the exact same thing.
yeah. So it was a fun little buy, and yeah. So if I get another one, maybe I'll open it and then I'll play with it.
Nice.
I like to
That's
keep
one of
things in the
those
boxes.
things, 50 years from now, people are gonna be like, "There was a Ahsoka and Hot Wheels crossover," and
Right.
you're gonna be like, "Yes,
Yes.
I have it," and
Speaking
it's
of, have you seen
yes.
episode 70 of the Hot Hangout podcast?
Right, yes. That thing could be worth, couple $1,000 in
Yeah.
20, 30 years, you never
I'm
know.
betting. I'm hoping.
Nice, good pickup. I'll have to be on the lookout next time I stop in. I was in Target yesterday. I should have looked.
See, always gotta
Yeah,
look. Always gotta look.
yeah.
It'd
I
be
was in the
funny.
grocery
You bought it
section.
too, and then like you would show like, look what I got. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah,
got it.
we both had separate segments today, showcasing the exact same thing we didn't know the
Yeah,
other person got too.
that's
That'd be
hilarious.
funny. Maybe, for the listeners on the, audio version, maybe we can post a photo on either X or Instagram or something like that of the race car with Ahsoka in it. So if you're interested in checking it out, it'll be available probably on one of those 2 platforms. So, well, the time has come. It is time to discuss the 3rd season, the premiere of The Bad Batch. This is a show which, by the way, if you're watching or listening to this, and you haven't checked out last week's episode of the podcast, that's a really good one to watch or listen to as a preface to this week's episode, because in last week's episode, we did discuss kind of all things season 1 and season 2 of Bad Batch in preparation for this season's episodes, particularly when it comes to the characters within the Bad Batch, the main core. And so, just real briefly, wanted to mention that in case you hadn't listened to it and you're like, that might be good. If you want to pause this episode, go listen to that one, come back and listen to this one. It'd be maybe something cool you could do. And so, moving into season 3 premiere, we're probably just going to cover each of these episodes one at a time, touching on some of the more major things and points that happen throughout the episodes. I do want to pose to you before we kind of go through each of these things that happen in the episodes, Joey. Did you have anything major or overarching or theme wise, not necessarily something specific, but or perhaps just a general takeaway from watching the 3 episodes?
I mean, they really needed all three of these episodes as a premiere. I think
Yeah.
if it was just the one, like the first one, it would have been as good as it was. It wasn't like it wasn't a banger, and
Hmm.
that'll speak a little. That's a little bit of a spoiler of how I kind of felt about these three. It wasn't maybe all together as the three put together is a pretty solid hour and a half, but
Hmm.
if I would have had one of these episodes for a week, I'd have been like maybe with
Yeah.
the exception of the last one.
Right.
um but yeah, I think for the most part I'm glad that they lumped these three together because of that. I don't know if that was a decision they made because of the stories kind of being so, I don't know if fractured is the word, but they're just so separate,
Hmm.
and where it's all very important to the story. I don't know if they carry well as far as single episodes. So I'll preface my entire thing by saying I hope the rest of the season isn't like that, where you go through an episode, if it is 22, 27. But again, glad for the different times, but if it's a shorter 22 minute episode, I'm gonna be like, that was it. I'm worried a little bit about that, I'll be honest. So maybe
Yeah.
not so far as the theme, but as far as how they decided to release it this time around. I think that's something that something that I definitely noticed right off the bat.
Yeah. I would agree. I think I was impressed with the order they released it in. Um, because I think watching so episodes 1 and 3 go together, obviously. 2 is, the wrecker hunter side of things. Um, but I think the way, particularly the order in which they released it, may like I'm watching episode 2 and episode 2 comes on and I come to the realization, I'm like, we're not gonna get to pick up where we were last. And immediately I'm like, dang it. I wanted to just like,
Right.
no, I wanted to continue with Omega. But I think it makes sense when you watch episode 3, which is why I resonate with what you said exactly, that the fact that all 3 of these were the premiere collectively is what made it work well. If it would have been just 1 or just 1 and 2 even, it would have left you wanting a little bit more. And so 3 kind of 1 kind of introduced the main concept of the season, and 3 concluded it nicely. And then 2 also showed us where the other part of the Bad Batch was in pursuit or headed. And I think they needed to do that before episode 3
Hmm.
to make it seem important to still pursue Omega because she was in captivity.
Right.
Um, we're kind of getting into some of the specifics now, but that was, I thought the structure of it was done really well. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, all collectively being the premiere, I thought was a really smart move. Um, and maybe I can just go ahead and say, and perhaps we can do this at the end if we want to as well. But I thought episode 3 was one of the best episodes of um, Bad Batch just in general. I liked it a lot. It was really well done, ranking up there with probably like the Crosshair episode from last season and maybe even episode 1 of the first season. You know,
Mhm.
some of the moments in that 3rd episode were awesome. So, I guess we can talk about more of the specific moments in depth as we go along, but so just I guess to begin with episode 1, which was called Confined very appropriately, I think the entirety of this episode is spent on Mount Tantus or in Mount Tantus in what is Omega and Crosshair's captivity, where their relationship kind of begins on or it continues from season 2 on somewhat of a sour note. Like Crosshair, when Omega approaches him, is like, "Kid, come on, like we're
Right.
not getting out of here. Like we're doomed. This is where we're doomed to live the rest of our lives in captivity." And we also learned that blood samples are being taken from clones in this kind of weird clock-like formation,
Yeah.
which I thought was very. I thought it was cool the way that was done. Did you like the
Yeah.
way that they kind of visually represented the ticking time
Yeah,
of
I
the
think
blood
well,
vials?
yeah, I'd be interested in the science behind it, like why they have to do it that way, but,
Dramatic
yeah.
effect.
Yeah, it was yeah, there's a scientist out there like, "You know what we could do is just, like, pour them all together, and it'd be, like, a
Yeah.
lot more efficient, and it would actually," and then the guy's like, "Actually, no, that's let's let it simmer a little bit.
Yeah, let it simmer.
Yeah, let it simmer, and then we're just gonna have, like a hand so it's gonna take it, like, maybe, like, 18 hours to get through the entire thing. What do you guys think about that?" The first one's like, "No, that sounds like a terrible idea." So I but yeah, that's definitely what it represents is time and how long it takes, and of course, and little spoiler for the end of it, but yeah, of course, Omega's is like at the very the end of the entire thing.
Right. Well, and not to jump around too much, because I don't think we learned this until maybe episode 3. Is it episode 1 or episode 3 where we learned that Nala Se has been throwing out all of Omega's vials?
It
I
was
don't.
it was one. It was early in one,
Okay,
yeah.
it was 1. So the fact, because Omega, there's a time lapse at a certain point in episode 1, and we learn she's been in captivity for like 4 or 5 months or something like that, like 120 something days or something. And my question is, how does Nala Se get away for
This is
5 months
this is what
getting rid
I'm
of the
saying.
blood vials?
I mean, they clearly, in the first shot that we had, it was like a scan of Omega's, like, blood sample and all this stuff, and she just deletes it every single day for the past 5 months.
Right.
Nobody's doing any audits
This
of,
is
like,
already someone who they're suspicious of, you
right.
know?
There's nobody doing audits of, like, you know what? That little girl clone, I haven't seen any of her blood. It's so weird, None of her stuff is coming through. That is very interesting. Nobody.
Yeah. Or maybe she was replacing it, but the way the show
Mhm.
talked about it, it made it seem like she was destroying,
Right,
but I
yeah.
guess the assumption I is perhaps she was replacing the blood vials of Omega. I don't know. Um, but anyways, side tangent. Nala Se destroys the blood sample from Omega because of something very important that we learn later on. So throughout this episode, we also learn that the Empire is seeking the reproduction of a genetic M count. For those that don't know what an M count is, this is something that's been mentioned, I believe, in The Mandalorian and several other moments. And M just refers to midichlorian, and all the like original trilogy purists. I feel like when they were watching this show, were just like, "How dare you bring midichlorians into this?" Because I know they're kind of a hot topic with some crowds, but
Well, I mean, they call it M count. They try to avoid it as
yeah,
much as
yeah,
possible
they're like,
without
"Let's
actually
not say
saying
the
it.
word."
Yeah, yeah.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. You think that's probably
Oh yeah,
intentional now that I think about it?
that's absolutely
Yeah,
the reason why they don't actually say the. It's like Voldemort around here. You don't say
yeah,
that word.
yeah. He must not be named. M count is to midichlorian as he who must not be named is to Voldemort.
Right.
We should run that one by Ezra after he's watched
Oh my
the
gosh, yeah.
first season or the
Oh,
first couple episodes of Bad Batch.
I'm sure he's got a short ready to go for that.
Yeah. Another thing we learned in this first episode is that Crosshair kind of dealing with this shaky hand. And I'm pretty sure this is from I don't know if it says this explicitly in the episode, but that he was being experimented on. I assume being like injected with midichlorians potentially, and that his body was like rejecting the midichlorians. So that's perhaps what the shake is.
The M count, you mean?
Um, yes, the M count. Sorry, I will. I will pledge to no longer say the word
Yep.
midichlorian for the rest of this podcast. I'm probably going to slip up and say it at least once. Just fair warning. But um, what did you think about the fact that maybe let's focus on Crosshair for just a minute or two. Um, I think initially I expected him to do exactly what he did in his response to Omega, in that he was kind of just old Crosshair, like pessimistic. Um, going back to the news section when we were talking about Twitter stuff,
Yeah. He's
Crosshair's a
on Twitter.
Twitter user.
At
um,
Crosshair.
yeah, Crosshair has always been the pessimistic one of the Bad Batch. You know, Omega brings up the fact we're breaking out of here. He's like, we're not breaking out of here." I did think it was interesting how over the course of episodes 1 and 3, you began to sort of see the old Crosshair reemerge. And maybe that's not even a good way of depicting it. Maybe we should just say like a new Crosshair.
Mm.
In a way, the way he behaved in episode 3, not to jump ahead too much, was almost an improvement of himself from season 1 of Bad Batch before he, um, went to the Empire and whatnot. But did you have any general thoughts on Crosshair
I'll
in
be
episode 1?
I'll be on in episode in
Or
episode
episodes
one,
1 and
yeah,
3,
1 and
either one.
3. I didn't think he was gonna make it out of 1 and 3. To be honest with you,
Really?
I thought there might have been a chance where he sacrifices himself to get Omega out.
Mhm.
Um, which was kind of what my prediction was last week when we were talking about it. I would have been surprised that it would happen so early and maybe not to necessarily for death, but just to get her out, like leave me behind, one of those types of things. So, and ultimately maybe just not make it at all. But yeah, it was the same thing. It was nice to see the teamwork,
Mhm.
when they actually did bust out of there. So I think that was her influence on him, right? Where it's like, this is, we can do this. We'll do this together. I'm not leaving you behind. And I just thought that was very Omega of her, and it was very Crosshair of him to not want to, originally. So I think that it was good though. It was good that they both got out. I'm happy that they're out already. I guess that's another thing.
Yeah.
I didn't want half of the season to be done, and they're still in this prison,
You didn't want
medical
an Andor
facility.
pulled?
I do no, please no. We've had enough slow burn. This is the last season of this show. Give us what we want here. So I'm glad that they're out already.
Yeah, I think I would resonate with that as well. I'm excited to see the reunification, only
Mm-hmm.
for kind of I want this season to be not just about the reunification between Crosshair and Omega and Hunter and Wrecker, and maybe also you could include Rex and Echo in that as well, but more so just about a general like coming together and realization that we need to do something as the clones
Right.
because we're being taken advantage of. Kind of like this clone uprising, so to speak. I really want to see that come to
Yeah, that
fruition.
I mean, they are definitely heading towards that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it also begs the question, and this is a question people have been asking since the beginning of season 1 of this show, is like, where are these guys during the original trilogy? Which might be the strongest case for the fact that none of them make it out. So, anyways, we'll see.
It's a big universe,
Yeah, you never know. You
big
never know.
universe. There might be some, like, refugee camp on some outer rim,
Yeah.
planet for all
Uh,
the clones. It could happen. And not, and I think, we're gonna jump a little bit to the episode 2 there, but the planet that they end up dropping off those kids at,
Pabu.
yeah, probably right. So I mean, there's something like that could be around.
Yeah, that's true. They've been hanging out on Pabu this whole time during the original
Yeah.
trilogy. Kind of the last point that I think is really important for the sake of the story that happens in episode 1. is this relationship that Omega has with one of the essentially they're like guard dogs. I think they're called Lurkas, um, that are kept in this Imperial facility under the watch of this guard droid, and she develops a relationship with one that's like a little bit standoffish initially by feeding him over time, and he grows to kind of care for Omega or she. I think her name. Well, Omega names her Batcher. I think she refers to her as she at one point in the episode. Um, which is also I think Batcher, this Lurka, this guard dog, is in a way sort of symbolic of, um, kind of the Bad Batch or maybe Omega even in a way. Like, she sees it as kind of this outcast amongst the other guard
Mm,
dog, these Lurkas, and so intentionally reaches out to it, tries to befriend it for the sake of, just because it's Omega, and Omega is, like, super
right.
nice to everyone and loving and kind. And then ultimately it comes to fruition in episode 3 when well, I guess we'll talk about that later on. But there is a point of this,
Yeah.
befriending in this relationship that just isn't for the sake of it, that comes back around in the 3rd episode of the show. And so oh, there was one other thing that I did think was super important. In this episode, you see Omega storing, uh, giving Alurka, Batcher, some of her food out of her lunch pail or something. But in the hidden compartment under the lunch pail, she keeps like collecting straw where she forms this doll, which is, I think, a replica of one that she had on the Marauder. And at one point in episode 1, it's confiscated by Emery, the doctor who's kind of in charge of her and who is also her sister, just, an older clone. Um, and in a really important moment at the end of episode 1, Emery gives her back the doll, sort of as like from the perspective of their relationship, it's like, I understand you. But from the understanding of the viewer, it's like, oh, Emery is definitely going to betray the Empire at the end of this
Right.
show.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wanted to touch one real quickly on Batcher.
Mhm.
Um, could they have had a better name? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, you made a
Too
great.
on the nose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You made a great point that maybe that's symbolic of the Bad Batch. But I mean, they called it Batcher. Like that was the first thing I thought of when I saw it. I'm like, okay, and I don't I'm trying to remember if at all in this series or in the Clone Wars if they're actually called the Bad Batch. Do people actually call them the Bad Batch, or are they always Clone Force 99?
I feel like the actual phrase "Bad Batch" was uttered at some point in season
Okay, yeah.
1. Yeah, most of the time they're just called Clone Force 99 or the defective ones or
Yeah, right,
something,
yeah.
or you're part of 99 or something like that. I think the
Yeah,
clones, the young clones in episode 2 actually referred to them as
the
like
defectives.
the defectives. Yeah.
And then Wrecker says the most effective or something like that. That's a
Yeah.
little.
Defective and defective.
Yeah, which by the way, is that the first time that's been said? Because I feel that should have been more. That's
I think
easily a
so.
slogan. Yeah.
I liked that tagline a lot.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
really good. Um yeah, for that. So anyway, I wanted to mention Batcher, but with Emery,
Mhm.
um yeah, that's a foreshadow for sure. Just like, kind of setting up the whole Batcher thing, like, Omega was the one that freed her, was the one that took care of her, because they were going to terminate Batcher at one point. So,
Right.
um, and that's
Well,
kind
they
of
were gonna
when
terminate her because she had become,
so
quote, unquote,
domesticated,
"domesticated." Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. By and I think that's when the whole breakout scene started, right? Was that was that what
Yeah.
ended up happening? Yeah. Anyway, we'll
Yeah.
get to that. But yeah, the returning of that straw doll definitely is, what is that called, an olive branch or whatever it is, like
Mhm.
that is her saying, listen, I know I seem a certain way, but I'm not cold hearted here. What I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's something, because up until that point it was very much every day, same time. Here's what we're gonna do. Take your blood, you do your chores, whatever. But by the end of it was something very different. So I think that was interesting. And more interesting was the time that had passed between this episode. They marked it in the little scratchings on the wall that Omega had, and just seeing that, you're just like, oh wow, that's a long time. Like you don't really think of it until they kind of visualize like that. So I think they did a really good job at showing that, and then showing the differences of where Omega and even Crosshair were at the beginning and then kind of at the end of this episode too.
Yeah, yeah. And then continuing it in episode 3 even. Um, but I guess before we get to episode 3, we should probably talk about episode 2. This one, while it was displaced in the sense that it was completely a separate story from episodes 1 and 3, in the sense that it was, talking about Hunter and Wrecker for the entirety of the episode, it still found a way to not feel like a throwaway episode because it was still going towards the mission of finding Omega and Crosshair. And really a cool callback to, is it I think it was season 1 when they first meet Roland Durand,
Mm-hmm.
of the Durand crime syndicate family, I guess, who is the son of Issa Durand. And there's this scene at the very beginning where Issa Durand is, sitting atop her throne. Roland is right there as well. Roland is I forget the name of his species. I guess I have it over.
Devorian.
Yes, a Deveronian, maybe.
Deveronian, yeah,
Yeah.
something along those lines.
He's the one that got his horn cut off by a member of the Pike Syndicate in season 1. And so the same Pike Syndicate member who cut his horn off comes before Issa Durand because Wrecker and Hunter bring this member of the Pike Syndicate in order to gain information, because they have a lead. A little bit unclear how they knew this information or how they acquired this member of the Pike Syndicate, but they have a lead that that Issa Durand can point them in the right direction of finding the secret cloning base. And so all that to say, Issa Durand, really cool inclusion in this episode. And we get to see her say, take the Pike prisoner away, and she gives the information to Wrecker and Hunter. What we later find out is that the information was outdated. So to summarize this episode, maybe in like 5 seconds, Issa gives outdated information. Outdated information leads to young clones. They take young clones to different planet and also are led to the right sector that Omega's is basically what this episode is. But along the way, the cooler parts of the episode are the relationships with the 3 regs, the young clones, that Hunter and Wrecker run into on the planet where the old location of Hemlock's lab was prior to its destruction. These slither vines were really interesting, Joey. What did you think about them?
They my friend messaged me, he texted me after he watched this episode, and he said, if this was a video game, this would be the hardest level. Because you constantly like just run into these things and they could transform into large, I don't know, like you can cut them off and they become like their own beings and they somehow stand on 2 feet or 4 feet at some point.
Right.
And then but then there's like this mother one in the bottom of it all. I'm not sure exactly how what the biology is behind it. That's exactly what I was thinking about when I saw it. I'm like, oh, this is the Sarlacc pit's like cousin or something like that. And yeah, so that I would imagine that's pretty scary. The even watching it, in animated form, I'm like, this is because it has all the teeth and all that. I think that's the scariest part.
Yeah.
Seeing that even in animated form, I'm like, oh, this is a little scary. So it also reminded me of, oh god, what were those? What were they transporting on Force Awakens when they first see Han and Chewie? They were transporting some very large, monstrous type of species, just like that, with the long tentacles and all that, and all the teeth.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. I'll look it up though.
So it definitely reminded me of that because of I mean, just kind of the monster type of quality to it. So I think that's what they were going for. I think they nailed it. But yeah, it was just a constant struggle against that particular species, that plant monster, Sarlacc. Yeah, there it is, right there. The explosion of the Sarlacc cousin.
That was right on cue. Nice. Rathtar, by the way.
Rathtar, there you go. Thank you.
is the thing that they were transporting in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, there are people that are watching this episode. They're like, "It was Raptor, come on!"
To
You,
be fair, I think I've only seen The Force Awakens like 4 times
okay,
total. So might
yeah, well,
need to give my sequel a rewatch.
maybe we do a trivia specifically on Force Awakens, so we're forced to watch it more often.
Sequel trilogy alien species is the topic for this trivia. So yeah, the lab location is destroyed. They've now moved to Mount Tantus. Obviously, Wrecker and Hunter don't know this. They meet these young clones who are very skeptical of like accepting help from anyone after they were betrayed by the older clones they knew back on Camino. We actually get a chance to see these three clones along with a lot of other young regs back on Camino in season one before the destruction of the planet. And so their names are Mox, Stack, and Deke. Understandably, they're pretty reluctant to accept help from anyone that's a clone after what's happened to them. So it kind of takes a little bit for them to, know, accept the fact that Hunter and Wrecker are searching for another clone. They're not the bad guys and that they are willing to help them. That takes kind of a good portion of the episode to get to that point. But eventually, Hunter and Wrecker go into the ruins with one of them, Deke, and this is when the Slithervine action happens. I feel like the Slithervines is like almost half this episode.
Oh
It
yeah,
felt like
absolutely.
one long action scene of them just trying to avoid getting eaten by this monstrosity of an animal.
Yeah, and apparently it could take down entire ships as well.
Yeah, yeah. But all you got to do is drop a bunch of explosives and thermal detonators down the mouth of the big mama one, and boom, then you win.
Right.
When in doubt, use a thermal detonator.
I'll tell you what though, the one thing that I kind of wish it went this way, but it didn't, was you know how when they discovered it was Hemlock's lab was, deserted and it was destroyed and all
Yeah.
that stuff. I was kind of hoping that this was like way after episode 3, right? I like they were actually on they're in the right area, but they actually were there just way too late. So like I
Oh,
was
I see what
hoping it
you're
was
saying.
it Mount Tantus? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I was hoping that they were actually going to be there at the right place, but the time is actually way off. Episode one,
Like
2, and 3
forward in time.
are just completely way off. So when I saw that, I'm like, is that are we in the right place? Am I in the right time area? Because that would have been, I thought that would have been a really cool way to tell the story. Like because the way that Hunter was saying, it's just been so long, and we need to find her. Remember when, because Echo and Rex were going to meet them, but it was going to take 2 rotations, and then Hunter's
Yeah,
like,
we
no,
can't
we
wait.
got to go
Yeah.
now. She's been waiting way too long. Now 5 months or whatever it is a long time, but they were making it seem like it was like long, like years
Years.
long,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So I was like, oh, are we actually where they were in episode 1, but just way after it? And that was kind of what I was hoping, but I don't think that is what it is. I think that we end up because they I think at the end of it they discover like they're in the right sector, like you said.
One of my favorite twists in movies and TV is when you realize the story is being told non-chronologically.
Right.
I think it adds such an like surprise, interesting element. When you initially said episode 3, I was like, it does take place after Revenge of the Sith. What do you mean? And then
Yeah.
I realized you meant like episode 3 of the Bad Batch.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be interesting for it to have taken place.
I should
Like
I should write these things.
you should
I'm
Disney
gonna do
call
yeah,
them
yeah,
up.
yeah.
That's essentially the culmination of the second episode. I imagine we'll probably see these clones at some point again in season 3, but from the conversation they had with Wrecker and Hunter, they are going to be dropped off on Pabu, the planet that we spent I think 2 episodes on
Hmm.
during the end of season 2, I believe it was. I think that's Fee's home planet, isn't that right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I think those were the 2 episodes that immediately preceded the demise of Tech,
Hmm.
or perhaps not demise of Tech. I
Yeah.
don't know.
The presumed demise.
Yes. There is a really great quote at the end of this episode before we move on to episode 3 discussion that Hunter says in reference to his talking to the other three young clones and says, "You make your own path something other than a soldier."
Yeah.
So I think Hunter realizes that there's more to life than just being a soldier.
Yeah, especially with Omega in his life now.
Yeah, I think all of the Bad Batch realize that, even Crosshair on some level. So, yeah, episode 2, we move into episode 3. We jump right back into where we left off with episode 1, and we quickly learn that there is a special guest visiting Mount Tantus. Uh, when you heard this, was there any
No.
inclination that you knew who it was? Like, because my immediate thought was like, "Oh, I think it's gonna be the Emperor."
Oh, I knew right away. Yeah, it was definitely the
Yeah,
Emperor. I mean, especially because they showed him in the trailer
trailer.
there. So
Yeah,
maybe if they didn't, I would have been like, I wonder who it could be, or So with it ended up being, yeah, that totally makes sense.
yeah, yeah. The Emperor's coming in to check on good old Project Necromancer, which largely has been kind of over mentioned briefly in different periods of Star Wars. Star Wars productions. That we saw, I think, a reference to Project Necromancer in season 3 of The Mandalorian when there's that little,
Mm.
hollow circle of people talking. When Gideon is talking to that group of people who are part of the, oh, I guess that would be what the I'm trying to think of the group of people that anyways, those group of people that he's talking to, that one of them mentions Project Necromancer, and I think that's in effort to try to tie it in to the somehow Palpatine is returned thing in Rise of Skywalker. I have more thoughts on that. Maybe I'll save it for
Mm.
after we've talked about episode 3, but Palpatine is there to check in on Project Necromancer. Hemlock welcomes him, but before he arrives, Nala Se warns Omega after she learns of the Emperor's impending arrival that Omega needs to get out ASAP and then in the process of doing that, healing Nala Se's data pad will enable her to help escape. And so Hemlock then welcomes Palpatine as he arrives. Super cool scene, by the way. I loved seeing the guards behind
Yeah,
Palpatine
that
as
was cool.
well.
Yeah, that gave
Yeah.
the Return of the Jedi vibes for sure.
Oh, yeah. He walked out, and I was like, "Dang, I feel like I'm watching episode 6 right now." So, that was a pretty cool moment, uh, for episode 3, and ultimately, Omega does go back to Crosshair. Crosshair this time is like, "Omega, like, I've told you." And it seems like he's a little bit more, like, "Alright, I'm gonna do this, I guess, but I'm gonna do it
Yeah,
reluctantly," sorta thing. But Omega, tells Crosshair to distract these 2 clone guards and the clone commandos. He distracts them. Omega opens his door. They stun both the clone commandos, and they make it out. However, not easily, I will
yeah.
say. Uh, the part of the episode, by the way, where that's happening simultaneously to this is when Hemlock is showing Palpatine the, cloning room,
Hmm.
which we can kind of assume we don't actually get to see what the
Right,
clones look like, but we can kind of assume that these are Palpatine clones.
right,
And I was wishing so desperately that they would just pan the camera and be like, "Just show us what it looks like."
right, right.
Um, and the way that this is, I think, meant to tie in to the sequel trilogy, um, and I actually didn't know this until I guess um, there is a novelized version of The Rise of Skywalker that has more information about the happenings of the film, where apparently I haven't read the book. This is just from stuff I've read and videos I've watched. Apparently, the father of Rey was one of these Palpatine clones.
Oh, okay.
That was a quote unquote defective non-M count uh Palpatine clone who then had Rey, which I don't really know exactly how that works if then Rey is like super force sensitive and her father wasn't, but
True. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not gonna ask questions. Uh
Sabine
uh
Wren. Well, we'll just go back to that.
yeah, yeah, Sabine Wren. Uh so anyways, the stuff with Palpatine I just think is really cool. I don't think it's gonna really go somewhere with finality in season 3
Right.
because I think it's more so meant to tie into other Star Wars stuff like the sequel trilogy and even Mandalorian stuff, kind of that we saw with Gideon and his production factory and mention of Project Necromancer in that show. So kind of going back to Crosshair and Omega, um, his hand is continuing to get worse, and as part of their escape, they do come face to face with Emery. She's like, "You gotta go back to your cell." Crosshair is like, "All right, we're not doing this," and he just stuns her.
Stuns her, yeah.
Um, I still think Emery's gonna come back around in the end of this show and be the one that
Hmm.
helps them in the end. I think there's a decent chance that Emery is the one who might actually do away with, Dr. Hemlock.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that would be a little bit of poetic justice. Maybe Nala Se and Emery together, who
Right,
knows?
yeah.
So that yeah, shortly after Palpatine's departure, Hemlock is then informed that Crosshair and Omega have escaped on the ship, which I think he told Omega about was in the jungle, but
Hmm.
was not functional or partially functional, if I remember correctly. And so then, upon awakening from being stunned, Emery relays the information about Omega to Hemlock because well, I guess not the information about Omega's blood yet, because that's not until after they've pursued them. And it's not until later in the episode that once Emery realizes that that Omega's blood has this incredibly high equivalent M count to what the Emperor's cloned M count should be, is when she's like, "Stop! You can't like shoot down the
Yeah.
ship that they've escaped in because if you kill her, then we won't have the blood sample." So Hemlock is forced to let them go because he needs to keep Omega alive if he wants to fulfill this promise to the Emperor that he's kept. Who, by the way, has promised him full support
Yes.
in terms of financial resources. We can assume. So where that leads into the future of the season, I think that's probably where we're going to see some bounty hunters come into this show.
Yep.
Maybe Asajj Ventress. Who
Hmm.
knows? I think we're probably going to see a lot of obviously pursuit of Omega from this point on in the show. I think that's probably where we're going to get the Asajj
Yeah.
inclusion, but I guess that remains to be seen. Maybe some Fennec Shand,
Hmm.
perhaps. Who knows?
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett. I would love to see just a
Well, we know
full.
we know Cad Bane's going to be there, right? So
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Shout out Cad Bane, probably my favorite bounty hunter personally. Um, so we've kind of covered most of the discussion of episode 3. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on before just a couple last few questions that are more overarching as it relates to the themes and kind of biggest takeaways from the first 3 episodes?
yeah, it was kind of hard not talking about episode 3 while we were talking about episode 1 because they they
Yeah.
were they were pretty much one episode altogether. But as we already said, the development of Crosshair kind of throughout, you kind of we think that was an important piece that not only did Crosshair need Omega to get out, but other way around as well. So I think they needed to be together as far as in order to get out. The M count stuff with Omega is interesting. We I think you and I had talked about this maybe offline.
Mhm.
The possibilities of Omega maybe being force sensitive or something
Yep.
to that effect, and that's kind of where we're headed now. That's where, with this M count, this unknown M count, the first time we've ever heard this term ever in Star Wars. Now that we know that it's elevated in her blood, we know that there's a world of this is we've seen this before. We've seen this path. What does that mean for Omega? Will we see Omega with a lightsaber by the end of the season? I don't know. So the possibilities now, open up a ton for her, and where something like the Bad Batch never really focused on things like the Force. Never.
Right.
There was something that's very in the background. It's there. It is in the Star Wars universe, much like something like an Andor. That's just something you don't talk about too much in there. Where now that they're now at the last season of the Bad Batch, they're bringing it in, they're introducing it in, and like they're doing it well. they're doing it because they want to incorporate the whole Palpatine clone type of storyline, and here's a great spot to do it. So I think this is already in these first three episodes has kind of set up a pretty good season. Because maybe at the top of the show we were talking about how maybe each episode by themselves weren't like super strong or super I guess outside of the third one, but each episode maybe if it was on its own in a week, it might not have been great. But this entire story for the over the three episodes, I think was really smart the way they did it, and got us excited to see exactly what's going to happen. Lining us up for bounty hunters to come in, lining us up for the reunion of the Bad Batch. So and I'm glad, like I said, that by the end of episode 3, they already have broken out of the prison. So lined up for whatever's going to come up, and now we have this whole M count thing. So
Right.
there's just a ton of things that they are getting us ready for the foreshadowing. Emery, we got to figure out what whose side she's on, and there's just going to be a lot of stories that are going to be told in the next couple months here on the Bad Batch.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to know more about Omega. Like, I know people have speculated she's force sensitive this entire show, even before we learned this. Um, like, can you have an incredibly high midichlorian count and not be force sensitive?
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's a question I would pose. Is I don't know of any other time that would be the case with someone else. But
Yeah, and was she? I mean, because obviously, Nala Se knew, she knew that, and because I'm assuming she was the one that was in charge of Omega, this entire time. So she knows that it was successful. However they cloned her, or however whatever they did with Omega, they did it what the
right,
Emperor wanted. So that's kind of crazy to know that that this is Omega. She is the one. Maybe she's the chosen one. Who knows?
that'd be kind of crazy. Those sneaky Kaminoans, they knew what they were doing this whole time.
That's right.
Yeah, the cloning Palpatine stuff. This is the other question I wanted to pose to you. Do you feel like, because Bad Batch came out for the first time almost 3 years ago now? Season one came
Right.
out on May 4th, 2021. Do you feel like Bad Batch is an effort to cast a better light on the cloning stuff in the sequels, especially Episode 9? Or do you feel like this is just something that was spawned out of
Mhm.
just because they wanted to do it over time? Because I feel like in a way, it's really hard to disconnect this show, at least having seen the first 3 episodes of season 3, from some of the sequel trilogy stuff. Do you think there is intentionality behind that? Like, that was planned way in advance? Or do you think this is something that just they're like, "Well, we have the opportunity because they're clones to kind of discuss cloning stuff, so maybe we'll connect it to episode 9." What do you feel like the vision was for all of that?
I think there was some planning behind this. I mean, maybe they didn't think that this particular show would be, because I mean, this is probably, as far as anything in visual form in the movie or a TV show, this is definitely the first time you really see it going. Well, I guess with Mandalorian too, right? So,
Mhm.
um, but over the past couple of years, that this is kind of that's what they were aiming towards. Now, if I can remember correctly, I think in the books, leading up to Force Awakens, the aftermath books, which take place after Return of the Jedi, and even with I think the Battlefront 2, not the one that we were talking about earlier, but the one that had released somewhat recently, there was talk about cloning, Emperor and all that stuff. So I think they had the foundation kind of ready for a while, even before the sequel trilogy was out. So I think they had the foundation ready. Um, I think when they decided to release the Bad Batch, they were like, actually, this is kind of what you were saying. Here's a good opportunity. Obviously they've developed clones, the Kaminoans, so they know what they're doing, and it makes sense if that's where the end game is. The end game being, and the Emperor has returned.
Mm.
I think they see this opportunity to say, you know what, yeah, we're gonna jump in on this, and this is how we're gonna tell this story, and this is so I think the story was set. I think they had an idea of what where how it was gonna get there. But then when they released this series, they were like, here it is. Here's how we're gonna do it. And not only with the Bad Batch, but I mean with the Mandalorian, like kind of like what I said earlier, and as well with the Bad Batch, kind of has its talons in a lot of different areas too. So
Mhm.
this is like the middle web, of a lot of different stories within Star Wars. So I I think I think over time they wanted to have a foundation for it, and they had it with the books, the comic books, the video games, but now finally visually they're going to do it over the past, starting with Mandalorian, going into Bad Batch, maybe even more with Mandalorian Grogu, maybe even more with anything else that happens during that time between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. Who knows? What comes out of the next couple of series of Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah, Bad Batch definitely feels like one of the more well-planned Star Wars IPs that they've had in the last decade or so. I think there's been a lot of thought that's gone into this, and I think there's a lot of intentionality behind it. And so I would agree in that regard. As it relates to kind of as you mentioned, them having their talents in sort of all different parts of Star Wars, I think that's what makes the Bad Batch fun. Is that it's like, oh, there's a Rebels reference. Oh, there's a Clone Wars
Right.
reference. Oh, there's a Mandalorian reference. Oh, there's a Rise of Skywalker reference. Like, I think that's what makes this show cool. Is that while it is not necessarily as integral to the overall story of Star Wars as a lot of other shows might be, it just, is so pervasive in lots of different pieces of what makes Star Wars, which is, I think, you can see bits of the Bad Batch in almost anything,
Right.
in any show, I should say,
And by the
so,
way, Asajj is coming back. So
yeah. Asajj will be here maybe next week, who knows? Probably in, less than in the next month, hopefully, I would think perhaps, so. Oh, the other thing that was kind of a joke of a question, but I was gonna bring it up anyways. Is Snoke just a failed Palpatine clone? Who
yeah.
says no?
Yep. Yep. I think we nailed it. We got it. Who is Snoke?
Snoke confirmed. I can't tell you how many hours I spent watching YouTube videos in 2015 after coming home from The Force Awakens and thinking, "Who is this guy? It's Darth Plagueis." Well, we
Sliced up in less.
yeah, yeah. We might have some Snoke. If this, I don't necessarily want Snoke answers from season 3 of Bad Batch. That's not what I'm looking for. But if we get them, I'm not gonna be mad.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if they're like well thought out and not complete, just like whatever answers. Like if it's a well thought out explanation to Snoke, I'll be like, cool. I'm good with that.
Have you
Now,
ever? There's a Kylo Ren comic. Have you ever read any of the Kylo Ren comics?
no, huh?
There is a little bit of Snoke in there, like early Snoke. I want to
Really?
say it wasn't hair that he had, but he had some type of something on his head that looks super silly. You'll have to look it up.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll look into that. I'll report back in episode 71, see what
yeah.
I thought
Oh
about
wait, wait. Oh
young
wait, we
Snoke.
have don't we have the Marvel Unlimited subscription?
That's true. Hashtag not an ad.
Not an ad at all, but we wouldn't mind it if it was.
Yeah. Did you have any other concluding thoughts on Bad Batch season 3 before we head to our question of the week this week?
No, I think we said it all already. I mean, the combination of the three episodes definitely needed to happen. Although there was a little bit of separation between 1 and 3 and then 2, but it was needed because you want to know where everyone's at, of course, right? So
Yeah.
again, I'm glad that they broke out of the prison. I'm glad that the Hunter and Wrecker are on their way. Uh, let's just get them together already. Let's get the crew back together. This is what we've been wanting for all of last season. R.I.P. Tech, or not. Maybe we see him very soon, hopefully. So I think this is a good start to the season.
Not next week's episode, but the following week's episode is titled The Return.
Oh,
So
okay.
maybe that's returning to one another. What are we returning to? Who knows?
Exactly.
So they'll be back together sooner than later, I would think. But our question we would like to pose for this week's episode is simply: did you like the Bad Batch premiere? Episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 3 of the Bad Batch. What did you think about it? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments of the video version of the podcast or on any of the socials or via email. You can send us your thoughts there if you please as well. And on next week's episode, we're going to be covering episode 4 of season 3 of the Bad Batch, scheduled to release on February 28th. That episode is titled A Different Approach. So, coming out in under a week's time, we'll be back next week for episode 71 of the Hoth Hangout podcast, covering that one, all things Bad Batch episode 4 of season 3, and potentially a reaction to episode 4 as well next week. Be on the lookout for that. Um, Joey, any last thoughts before we outro this thing? Or I guess
No,
we can, go for
yeah. I mean, again,
it.
y'all gotta watch Bad Batch. Y'all gotta watch Rebels and Clone Wars and everything. It's so good. Star Wars is so good, and I'm happy we're back watching it.
Me too. It's fun to be back in a era of new Star Wars content continually coming out week to week. It feels very, very exciting. Just a quick little look ahead to the next couple weeks of Bad Batch. You've got episode 4 on the 28th of February, episode 5 on the 6th of March, and then that double episode week on March 13th. So be on the lookout for episode 6 and 7, both coming in just about 4 weeks' time from now. So lots to be excited for, lots of new Bad Batch content. Super pumped to see how it all plays out in the rest of the season. As a reminder, you can check out the Hoth Hangout podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple, and you can leave a 5-star review on either of those platforms. The video version of the podcast is available on YouTube. Check us out over there. Thank you to the 382 of you who are subscribed to the YouTube channel. And if you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel for Hoth Hangout, definitely check us out over there and subscribe. We would appreciate it very much. You can find us via email at hothhangout@gmail.com. If you have any Star Wars related thoughts you'd like to send to us, we'd love to showcase them here on the podcast, especially if they're Bad Batch thoughts, especially during this time. Additionally, the Hoth Hangout podcast is findable on the socials, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, or X. We're findable at Hoth Hangout on each of those. And as a reminder, be on the lookout in the next week or two for a community Hoth Hangout Discord channel coming very, very soon, with more information to come in episode 71 of the Hoth Hangout podcast next week. And a special thank you to Gibbo for producing today's show, video, assets, and for being able to fight off Slither Vines all by himself.
He's a strong man. He's a strong man right there.
Strong man. Well, it's been a fun one today. Super pumped for all that remains with the rest of season 3 of the Bad Batch. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Shout out to Rika and Hunter and Tech and Crosshair and Echo and Rex and Omega and all the other Australian accent characters in this show. We appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Tune in next week when we'll be talking about episode 4 of season 3 of the Bad Batch. We look forward to having you all listen to then very, very much. Thanks for listening to this one, and may the Force be with you.